All right, folks, we are ready to do section 4. So welcome back to the Hyperautomation Specialist Practice Exam. And we are going to go ahead and get into section 4 here. So in this one, we have a quick, easier question. So it appears sometimes you'll get those on the exam and they look really fast. Not a lot of reading anyway. So which automation in Salesforce flow can be completed without any user action? Okay, so there's Visualforce page approval processes, screen flows, and then scheduled trigger flows. Okay, without any user action. Okay, screen flows does require approval processes, obviously do Visualforce page. So all of these would require a user action, whereas the scheduled trigger flow does not. So the correct answer in this case would be A. All right, and then also too, again, we want to come down here and look at which type of flow should be implemented for this use case. So we're looking at, again, some of the types of flows here. And we're looking at, as a result of the update, the Hyperautomation practitioner needs to create additional referential data in Salesforce. So what are we doing here? The MuleSoft team at any airlines is tasked with updating data in Salesforce using a system API. The requirement states that the MuleSoft team calls another system and then updates Salesforce. The event that triggers this requirement is taken from a MuleSoft RPA process that was implemented in the past. Okay. As a result, the Hyperautomation practitioner needs to create additional referential data. What type of flow should be implemented in this use case? A screen, event, schedule, or record triggered flow. Okay. So as we look at the scenario here, this is going to be a result of something that has changed in a record. Something that has changed in a record. Okay. Because it's updating data in Salesforce. And again, as we can see, basically that is going to be something that changes on a record. It's not going to be a schedule. It's not going to be an event, nor is it going to be a screen triggered. It's going to be a record triggered. So the correct answer in this case is A, the record triggered flow. All right. Any airlines wants to build a digital experience website, which includes an Einstein bot. What should the Hyperautomation practitioner do to implement this requirement? So when we're using an Einstein bot, there are certain things that we have to have included. Use LWC to build a website and publish it in Salesforce. Build a website using HTML and CSS and expose it as an LWC component. Use the digital experience option in Salesforce setup, or use the sites option from the user interfaces in Salesforce. That's pretty easy because it is using the site options. So the answer for this one is A. Hopefully all the questions will be that easy. I'm going to tell you that they're not. So hate to break it to you, but they're not all that simple. And maybe you'll get a few simple ones. I don't know. I'm not familiar with all of the questions on this exam. I did not help write this one. So anyway, which solution should be built to meet this requirement? Okay, so any airlines has more customer support inquiries than their staff can process. So we're talking about customer support, and it needs a Hyperautomation solution to handle their support cases in Salesforce. Okay, so again, think of this, a bunch of customer support inquiries, a screen flow to process the customer interaction and case creation, a MuleSoft Composer flow to process customer interaction and invoke an auto launch flow, an Einstein bot to process customer interaction and invoke a record triggered flow orchestration, or an Einstein bot to process customer interaction and invoke an auto launch flow. Okay, so I could see that there might be cases of some of these. Again, you're going to see some of the questions on the exam that they could provide this solution, but is it the best solution? And the best solution in this case would be a bot that handles that customer interaction to invoke an auto launch flow. Okay, that way it's not involving any kind of, human in the loop or any kind of orchestration that needs to be managed by by an employee. So yeah, A is going to be the correct answer there. All right, coming up the list, which two steps, choosing two, again, remember what we said about that, you do need to make sure you choose two. Which two steps must the hyperautomation practitioner perform to get the data from the Einstein bot interaction into the external system? Okay, so NTO needs to implement a bot, an Einstein chatbot, that automates customer interactions and saves the data to an external system. Okay. The process involves collecting new data that does not have a corresponding standard object in Salesforce. So we're collecting new data, doesn't have a standard object, and it needs to go to an external system. All right, so let's take a look at these. Create a Salesforce trigger flow that passes the bot data to a MuleSoft Composer flow that updates the external system. Not so sure about that one. Create a variable in the Einstein bot to hold the data in Salesforce. All right, that still is not where we need to be. Create a MuleSoft Composer record trigger flow that updates the external system. Okay, now that's a little more along the line. That's part of this answer here. Because we don't necessarily want to pass the bot data. It's going to be, we're going to use that data in the configuration. And we also, remember it says does not have a standard object in Salesforce. So we want to create a custom object. We want to create a custom object in Salesforce to hold the data that the Einstein bot collects. So this is A and B are our solution here, or the correct answer. So we need that custom object to hold the data that the bot collects, and then the MuleSoft Composer trigger flow. So where that differentiates from D is the way it's worded. So it's very similar in nature, but it's not quite 100% there. So A and B are the correct answers there. Number 35, which statement is correct about interviews and cards in Salesforce Flow debugging mode? Now, any of you that have been in my class or my study sessions, you know I will harp on this. If you've taken the curriculum course, you may not know what an interview is, but I do emphasize that when you debug a flow in Salesforce, that is called an interview, and the steps along are called the cards. So as we look down, the cards are for each element that runs. Okay, so then in starting bottom up, only one card is produced per interview. That's not true. It depends on how many elements there are. One interview per time that it's run. Okay, so it's saying only one card is produced per interview. Only one test should cover all elements in the flow. That's not true. Multiple cards are produced per interview. Yeah, but do not cover all branches. Yeah. Therefore, one test should cover all elements in a flow. No. Okay. What if you have a branch that goes another direction? You have a decision and it only goes one way. So that's not true. Okay. Only one card is produced per interview. Again, that's not accurate to begin with. So that one we can throw out. Process of elimination. A, multiple cards are produced per interview, but do not cover all branches. Okay, now here we go. Therefore, multiple tests should be created to account for all elements of the flow. A, yeah, that's accurate. Okay, so the debug process of a Salesforce flow is called an interview. Every element in that process or every element of that given invocation or whatever route you're taking for that particular debug path for the business process will create a card. And so it will not cover all branches. You know, if you've got a decision happening, it won't cover all. So the correct answer is A. Moving right along. Which sequence of steps must the hyperautomation practitioner perform to ensure that MuleSoft APIs can be invoked from within Salesforce Flow? Okay, so this is in the piece of the integrations. And if you remember, whether you took the class or you're with me on a fast track or a study, we talk about the integration pieces between MuleSoft and Salesforce, right? Oh, there you go. So anyway, NTO needs to update multiple systems outside of Salesforce based on record updates within Salesforce. Okay, so the practitioner needs to configure Salesforce to call several APIs created by the MuleSoft development team from within a Salesforce flow. What do we have to do to make that happen? And when we do that integration piece, what occurs is there's actual Apex classes created to use for each of the endpoints. And so when we look at the options here, we'll start bottom up. D is create a platform event. No, that's not right. C, enable MuleSoft Composer. No, Composer doesn't have anything to do with this. B, create a name credential. Okay, that's one of our elements that need to be created, the configuration. And then enable Composer. No. And then A is create a named credential, create an external service. Yes, it is A. These are the two. In addition, there is also the permission sets, and also two that are out there as a result of this are the authentication that is going to be used for this. But these are the primary ones, the name credential and external service. Yes. All right, 37, and that's the last one in this section. So as you know, I'm kind of doing this per section. Number 37, NTO. Okay, let me go back. According to best practices, what two elements of a hyperautomation solution should be implemented? All right, so here's what needs to happen. NTO needs to develop an integration between Salesforce, NetSuite, and Jira. The integration must meet the following requirements. Okay, so we're integrating between these three. It needs to import orders into NetSuite to a custom orders object in Salesforce. It needs to create cases in Salesforce based on Jira issues. It needs to create a single user interface for a service rep to interact with cases and orders inside of Salesforce. So you have a service rep interacting with the cases and the orders. Choose two. Okay, choose two. Create a flow orchestration that allows the users to interact with cases, orders, and their related records in Salesforce. Okay. Create an auto-launched flow that connects Jira and NetSuite via the API to create and update Salesforce data. All right, an auto-launch flow when we are importing, creating cases, and creating an interface. Okay. Create a MuleSoft Composer flow for each integration to create and update Salesforce data. Okay, that's interesting. And then create a screen flow, which allows the users to interact with the cases, orders, and the related records in Salesforce. All right, so create a single user interface for a service rep with the cases and orders inside Salesforce. A is going to do that. There it is right there. The A, create a screen flow that allows that. The other ones, now, you know, when you look at these, again, there's the possibility of them being completed through some, I don't know about, I would not lean towards an auto launch flow because that is not necessarily what we're looking for here. It would either be the composer or flow orchestration, but in this case, it's saying the flow orchestration allows the users to interface or to interact. So that's not what we want. The screen flow is going to do that. So that eliminates D. So that's going to bring us back to B. That's going to integrate and create and update Salesforce data. So we have two different requirements that we're after here. That first one is that interaction, and the second one is to integrate and update the data. So it's A and B. It's A and B, because C and D really are not going to be a best fit for that, nor is it going to provide the proper interaction that we're needing for that user interface. All right. So this brings us up to section 5. I'm going to close this one out and see you on the next video.